Hey there, fellow history nerds, trivia champs, and people who accidentally clicked the wrong podcast. Welcome to the American Presidency Unfiltered, the only show where we peel back the presidential portrait and see what's behind the powdered wigs and polished marble. I'm your host, Brad Pitzl, and today we're diving into the whiskey-soaked, scandal-stained presidency of Franklin Pierce, a man so pretty that they called him Handsome Frank, and so drunk that they probably shouldn't have handed him the reins of the nation on the brink of the Civil War. Stick around because we've got plenty to go over, some hard truths and more uncomfortable silences than Pierce had sober days in office. Let's get started. Today's episode is brought to you by politicaltradingcards.com. Grab a piece of history with the latest trading cards from the left and the right. politicaltradingcards.com. Let's set the stage. The year is 1852. Franklin Pierce, a New Hampshire native, a Mexican-American war veteran, and a dough-faced Democrat, a term that meant Northern man with Southern principles, gets elected 14th President of the United States. He was a compromise candidate in a deeply divided party, mostly because he hadn't made anyone mad yet. That would change. Pierce was handsome, charming, and utterly forgettable at first glance. But behind that chiseled jawline was a man plagued by personal tragedy and drowning, literally and figuratively, in alcohol. His wife, Jane, hated politics and Washington. His 3 children all died young. The last, Benny, just weeks before the inauguration in a gruesome train accident that the Pierces witnessed firsthand. Not exactly a mood setter for leading a fractured country. And it only gets messier from here. All right, let's talk about the incident. The moment where Pierce's drinking stopped being just a whispered rumor and became headline-worthy. In 1853, not long after taking office, Pierce allegedly ran over a woman with his horse and carriage while intoxicated. That's right. President hits pedestrian while drunk would have been a 19th century equivalent of a CNN breaking news alert. Now here's the kicker. The charges were dropped due to lack of evidence. But as anyone who's lived in Washington knows, just because the case disappears doesn't mean the stink does. The public already had questions about his drinking. This incident just confirmed their worst fears. According to historians, including those over at Presidents' website and even Wikipedia, Pierce had a long history of heavy drinking, and the stress of the presidency did not inspire him to switch to black tea. Imagine if your president was trending on X every week for drunken driving. Only this was the 1850s, so trending was people whispering behind velvet curtains and editorial cartoons roasting him in the ink. Needless to say, trust in his leadership took a serious hit. Now, if running someone over while tipsy wasn't enough of a PR disaster, enter the Kansas-Nebraska Act, Pierce's signature legislative train wreck. Here's a short version. The act, passed in 1854, allowed settlers in those territories to decide for themselves whether to allow slavery. Sounds democratic, right? Well, it essentially repealed the Missouri Compromise of 1820, which had kept a lid on slavery and that debate for decades. Pierce backed it, enthusiastically. Like, hold my bourbon, I got this level of enthusiasm. What followed was a blood-soaked period known as Bleeding Kansas, where pro-slavery and anti-slavery settlers initially fought in the streets. So much for unity. Instead of calming the nation, Pierce had tossed kerosene on an already raging fire. Many Northerners, they saw him as spineless, a puppet for the Southern slaveocracy. Southerners weren't exactly impressed either. The whole country watched as his presidency unraveled like a poorly stitched campaign banner. Let's talk leadership, or in Pierce's case, the vacuum where leadership was supposed to be. Franklin Pierce was, to put it kindly, a consensus seeker. To put it unkindly, he was a jellyfish in a hurricane. He rarely took a firm stance, deferred constantly to his cabinet, which included Confederate President Jefferson Davis. Wow. He really seemed more interested in appeasing than even leading. Pierce also had this tragic tendency to think he could charm his way through political crisis, as if his sad eyes and great hair could mend sectional divides and reverse the nation's slow march toward a civil war. Spoiler alert, it could not. Even his fellow Democrats turned on him. He was denied renomination in 1856. A sitting president dumped by his own party. You've really got to drop the ball for that to happen. And he did. repeatedly. So what's Franklin Pierce's legacy? Well, aside from ranking near the bottom on almost all president lists, Pierce is remembered as a cautionary tale. He's the embodiment of what happens when charisma meets catastrophe, when a man too broken by personal loss and too reliant on drinking is asked to lead a country in crisis. To be fair, he didn't cause the Civil War, but he absolutely failed to prevent it. He greased the wheels on the track to disunion. He died in 1869, a lonely widower and self-professed alcoholic. One of his few remaining friends, Nathaniel Hawthorne, the author of The Scarlet Letter. Hawthorne even wrote a glowing biography of him, proof that even presidents need PR friends. But history has been far less kind. So what do we learn today, dear listeners? That being good-looking isn't enough to lead a nation? That maybe, just maybe, public drunkenness and governance don't mix? Whatever the takeaway, Franklin Pierce's story is a reminder that the presidency just doesn't reveal a man's strengths. It exposes his weaknesses in 4K, or in this case, sepia tone. Thanks for listening to the American Presidency Unfiltered, reminding you that history isn't just about dates and names. It's about real people, often doing really dumb things in high office. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review, unless you're one of Franklin Pierce's old drinking buddies. No hard feelings. Catch you next time.